the next award to Grace Ross. And again, Reggie was the first awardee of the Chaney Goodman Schwerner Award. There have only been 3 times that we have presented this award before.
Wow.
Now, you know, I had prepared this really nice speech. And every day that you wake up, you really want to be able to come up with something new, meet somebody new, learn something new. And as I was sitting here, getting ready to reach into my right-hand pocket and pull out this wonderful speech, and after you hear Barbara and you hear John, and all of a sudden you get some flashbacks, you know, and then it becomes like a wow moment, you know. So when John was talking, you know, I realized that John and I have been knowing each other for our entire lives. We came from the same neighborhood, the Greater Grove Hall area. You know, I'm certain that his family, as well as my family, came from the left side of 0. I can actually say that when I look out here in this audience, that 99.9% of every one of you all came from the left side of 0 as well. So the struggle continues. I said a wow moment. And like I said, I have this here prepared speech, not going to pull it out because I was inspired today. I wake up and think that it's just going to be another day, and every day something happens new for me. And I'm blessed to wake up every day and get that newness. Today, I was inspired once again.
All right now.
Young man that spoke earlier this evening named Carlton Williams. Carlton, where you at? Raise your hand, Carlton. Yeah. Carlton taught me something that I didn't really know, and now I got to go back and read the Constitution once again to make sure I understand about that 10%. Because I didn't understand that, and now I got to go back and I got to do that. So thank you.
Amen.
One of the things that he said that inspired me, that leads me to this introduction, was he said, every day that we wake up, we need to make the system afraid. Yeah, and I said, wow, that's profound. You know, how many of us wake up every day and try to be careful, try to be apologetic for the things that we know that are right, but we want to take it easy because we don't want to get ourselves in trouble.
That's right.
When in fact, if we make the system afraid, that trouble's coming our way anyway. So we should meet it head on, get it done, get it over with so the victory comes that much quicker.
Yes.
So when Juan asked me to introduce Grace Ross, you know, I was trying to figure out, wow, yeah, I need to learn something about Grace because I don't think I know her, you know. And you know, I introduced myself to her over there, you know, and you know how something says to you, gee, I think I know her. I was past with her, you know. And we were sitting here, and she asked me a simple question, and that question was, where do you know Zakia Alaki from? You know, I said, well, I know Zakia from back in the 1980s. You know, she's been struggling a long time. You know, and she said, well, if you know her, I should know you. You know, so we kept on talking. Next thing I know, our paths really did cross over the past 25 years. And then I realized that those profound words that Carlton spoke today relates
Yes,
to grace.
Amen.
absolutely.
All right now.
Some people have to get up in the mornings and say something that's going to get the system revved up. There are other people that just get up. And when they see you coming,
They know.
they're revved up.
That's right.
Grace is one of these people.
Yes,
Right.
When you see Grace coming, you know it's on. It's definitely on. You know, so, you know, I'm actually very proud, you know, to be able to present this award to her, but I know it's a very special award. One doesn't give these awards out. I'm pleased to be able to be one of the first recipients. And I am even more pleased to be able to present this award to Grace Ross. Now, as John said, you can read her bio, you can Google her, you can ask her friends in these two front rows
yes.
that
That's right.
her reputation really does precede her. But rather than go through all of that, I think I'll just read this quote. And it says that for many years, Grace Ross has been guided by an inspiring inscription from James Chaney's grave, which he has hung on her wall. Quote, "There are those who are alive, yet will never live. There are those who are dead, yet will live forever. Great deeds inspire and encourage the living." That's Grace. So Grace, please come up. Goodman Schwerner Advocacy Award presented by the NAACP New England Area Conference to Grace A. Ross in recognition of her exceptional advocacy and commitment to economic justice, particularly for the communities of color, through her selfless leadership to end predatory mortgage lending and illegal home mortgage foreclosures.
Amen.
This day, September 24th, 2016. Congratulations.
Still ain't done. We got work to do.
Wow. Juan sent me this letter. It says G. Ross letter. And I didn't have time to open it. Those of you who know what's going on with foreclosures these days, the foreclosures were terrible. They've been terrible, but they were especially terrible in 2010, 2011, 2012. It was noticeable to people, but for communities of color, really bad before that. And so I didn't open the letter from Juan. So he calls me. Like 2 days later, he says, "Did you happen to open that email I sent you with the letter attached?" And I'm like, "No." He said, "I think you should do that." I said, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll call you back." He said, "No, I will wait on the phone." And you know, it is very meaningful for me, and Reggie shared with you why, that it's the Chaney and Goodman Schwerner Award. But this means a great deal to me, partly because I think it is special when we remember we're in it together, right? There's a, folks quote the different versions of the King quote about threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But I think it's something much more profound than that. I remember in college learning about Buddhism and the higher road Buddhism that said that you can't reach nirvana until even the grass itself is liberated. I was also reflecting and thinking about this award about, well, I think I'm just going to skip a stone across the water a little bit. My family grew up in New York, and although my background is white and Christian, my family lived a much more inclusive and diverse life than that. A lot of our friends were Jewish. My brother's best friend, who's a little older than me, and my father's best friend were African American. And my father's 91st birthday, my mother gathered a few of his longtime best friends together, including John, who was his best friend, was African American. Everybody else at the table's white. And some sensitive white person in the group turns to him and says, "What do you think was Martin Luther King's greatest gift to the black community?" And my mother, who was not always on it, but was on it more often than not, thought, "Oh yeah, let's have the one black man in the white group pontificate for the whole black community what Martin Luther King's greatest gift was." And so she stepped in and she said, "You know, I don't know what John would say, but I will say this. He probably saved the soul of white America."
Amen.
And I think that there was some understanding that I was raised with about the fact that we are all one community, one family, and that it is only in the saving of the souls of the folks who were raised to oppress that we can reach justice for everybody. And so my life, I have been blessed by the greatest mentors in the world, and I want to thank two of my chosen family that are here, George Friday and Kelly Bates, keep me on the right road and have taught me a lot. I did ask Mel King if he would come, and I think it is very challenging for him to get out much these days, but I was working as a community organizer with the same group what you and I figured out I had met you through in Metro West. He was working on housing stuff. We were in the office on the day when the planes struck the towers in New York. And a number of the folks I worked with, some of them had family who worked in the cleaning staff in those buildings. And I grew up in New York, so I have family there. Kelly was in this position too. You couldn't reach people, right? The phone lines, you just couldn't reach people, sometimes for days. And so I was trying to figure out how to be supportive, check in with my already huge network of friends to sort of see if folks were okay, if family members were okay, if friends were okay, because no one could get word out necessarily. And so I struggled. How do you ask? You don't say, "Hey, anybody in your family die yesterday?" Probably not the best way to put it. So what I struggled with, I came to calling people and saying, did you have any loved ones in harm's way on 9/11? So I reached Mel and I asked him that question without a heartbeat. He says, "Millions."
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is that we are all each other's loved ones, if we can remember that. And so the work we're doing to try and end not just the foreclosures, but the predatory loans, and Juan and I have spent much time with that. Some of you have been kind enough to have us come to your chapters and your branches and speak. The Worcester branch has been unbelievably involved and supportive. the only way the banks got away with what they got away with and what they're still getting away with, grabbing more wealth than any of us could imagine in the tens of trillions of dollars, since they're not telling the truth about how much money it is, I'll give you a denomination, is by doing what the system has learned works. You take out the people of color, the single women head of households first, and if that works, then you take out everybody. And that's basically where we are. Now, we can't get from here to justice until we all realize that we all know somebody, and we all know people who may not have been foreclosed but are overpaying on the same predatory loans that will cost 6 times over the life of that loan instead of the traditional 2.25. That money's still being ravaged out of communities that were purposefully targeted, and I think that for me, you know, life, liberty, and property, I always got the life and liberty part, and I thought, property. And I think that we didn't understand until we were being stripped of the stability of the folks who do own the homes in our communities, who can be a base for the kids when they're in trouble, to go when no one else is home because everybody's working 2 and 3 jobs. I don't think we realized how important it was, and the reason we have no recollection of how important it is, and there are stories obviously, and my friend Sarah here has shared some of those who remember back into their families who had a foreclosure during the Great Depression. But that, honestly, in terms of percentages, was a walk in the park. The last time it's been this bad was leading into the American Revolution. And that is not a mistake in terms of our history. There's a reason why it was life, liberty, and property, and it's because people had just been through it. And they knew what it meant. And they understood that when you have judges, because at that point they had foreclosed to the courts, who would ride into town, folks would block them. It's what led to the revolution, is that judges were not allowed to sit. The tax collectors were not allowed to collect taxes. And that's because they figured out the way they protected each other was to not let the judges sit so a foreclosure could not happen. Now when sharecroppers had their homes being taken, the judge wasn't the problem. So folks stood on each other's lawns, on each other's front porches. And that's where we will be, and we will get there when we win this fight. Nobody's going to be sitting ashamed at home behind their door, scared of the foreclosure. Our neighbors are going to know, and we're not going to be ashamed because we're going to stand with each other remembering that it's, you know, justice for everyone that we need. And that's how we get there, is because we don't put up with being told it's our fault, we're the bad guys, we deserve it, whatever, anymore. The folks who are leading the fight are learning that and are teaching each other that. We need the whole community to recognize it. I say to folks often that this is, I believe, part of helping that arc of the universe bend towards justice, which is my preferred quote about that arc. We help it get there. Because just as Black Lives Matters has gone after the life part of life, liberty, and property, we will know that we are all equal human beings under the law when all of our lives, liberty, and property is equally well protected, not just a few lucky folks. That the reason that the banks could go after everybody for subprime mortgages was because of the fight of the civil rights movement had ended redlining. So a new generation was finally being able to do what every generation who had wealth to do it had done in other communities, which was to buy a home. Not too much before that is when women became not property of their husbands. I do not think it is a fluke that the industry figured out that they could take out people of color and women during the time period when wealth was finally being allowed to be invested in a home that could then be the legacy of the children. And it is not unusual in our fight that when the parents have been too beaten up, it's their 20-year-old children who come to our meetings and fight for those homes. It was their home they grew up in, and it's their legacy. And we can't even get the courts to recognize that they have as much right to that home as their parents, and that they have as much right to stand in court and fight for it as the parents, who have often been too beaten up to fight. So, as always, Barbara and I are of the same mindset. This award is not for me, this award is for the work, and work that I hope we all will engage in more with our eyes open and with a refusal to allow anyone to think this was their fault. The biggest banks figured out how to rape and pillage our communities. That is never the fault of the folks in our communities. And I'll leave you with one last thought. When I ran for governor in 2006, I used to say this to folks because when you run for office, people think you're really important. And what I am always reminded of is, you know, when the Montgomery bus boycott succeeded, a year of walking, 50,000 folks walked for a year. We know the names of a few. Some of you may know the names of others that no one else knows the name of. But if 100 of those folks had ridden the buses, that boycott would never have worked. We stand on the shoulders as much of the unnamed 50,000 as we do of any name that we know. So, thank you, but this award goes to you.
We truly believe that these awardees stand in the light that was cast by Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner. And the reason for the namesake. I am pleased, delighted tonight to present Reverend Dr. Alvan Johnson, who will say a few words of inspiration for us here this evening. His bio is in the program booklet, so I'm not going to go through that and prolong the evening, but I'll ask you to peruse that at your convenience. Brother Johnson.
I bring you greetings this evening in the name of all that is good and holy. Amen. I salute my brother and my friend, and I thank Juan Cofield and to all of the officers of the region for allowing me to address this conference. To the honorees and to those who adorn the dais, and to our guests and visitors and friends. When the wait staff came and they offered me some wine, I had to share with them the fact that I had to say to them, I'm terribly sorry, but I don't drink anymore. And I don't drink any less. So now all I do is swallow. See me at the end of the year. Listen, beloved, ladies and gentlemen, and sisters and brothers, would you be kind enough to do me a personal favor, and would you please stand? Because our time together this evening swirls around the topic, a standing engagement.
All right.
The NAACP Regional Conference and all people of goodwill now, right now, tonight, we have a standing engagement. Please be seated. Beloved, we are gathered this evening yearning for that moment when we really could lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. But this moment is overshadowed with the waning influence of the brilliant presidency of Barack Hussein Obama. It is a moment darkened and dampened by divisive rhetoric that threatens to unravel the very fabric and fiber of American culture. If only I could encourage us to sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. However, the faith we have been taught to have in the Constitution of the United States of America that offers liberty and justice for all is being snuffed out by the very barrels of the guns charged with the responsibility of securing that justice. If only we could sing a song filled with the hope that the present has brought us. But that hope is dotted and riddled with threats of physiological walls between our neighbors and xenophobic psychological barriers between us and our faith partners. We are gathered even though, having survived weary years and countless silent tears felt in the days when Chaney and Goodman and Schwerner had already died. Here we are, facing the rising sun of a new day begun. But we must march on until victory is won. We must march on now more vigorously than ever, because the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. We must march on. We might accidentally be exported or deported. We must march on, or our right to vote will summarily yet surreptitiously be taken away. We must march on because some of us are still sleeping and the parade will help them to stay woke. We must march on because some minds are still enslaved by pills and powder. Unfortunately, some black people still believe that the white man's ice is colder. I'm not a racist, but all ice is ice. And all ice is equal. And all votes matter. And all lives matter, and therefore black lives matter. And all businesses matter, and all children matter. And all of us must be allowed to obtain life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we must march on until victory is won in every classroom. Not just the classrooms of the rich or the classrooms of lottery winners. We must march on until victory is won in the classrooms of those who are charged with the mandatory responsibility of educating the physically and emotionally challenged. And we must march on until victory is won in every classroom. We must march on until victory is won in all chicanery designed to deny our citizens the right to vote is utterly eliminated. Further, and what frightens me is right now the control of the Senate and the House may not be in the most advantageous hands of those who seek the well-being of those who need assistance. Should the presidency and the judiciary also fall into those hands, we might need a steamship. You all, are you feeling me up here?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? We must march on because more than 20 million Americans who had no insurance can now receive medical attention without worrying about how it would be paid for. Failing to vote jeopardizes them, and countless millions more would be subjected to what I call, and I'm sorry, if you invited me here, I'm going to give you my opinion. Those people who need health care the most would be subjected to heartless cretins whose families are well taken care of by the American public. Every vote matters. I know. There ain't no sense in coming if you're not going to get in trouble. There has now I'm a life member of the NAACP, let's be clear.
That's right, okay.
So I'm talking to my people.
Yeah.
And understand that we all have different views on certain matters. There has been vibrant internal and external reevaluation of the use of the term colored people. But recent idiocy has solved the inquiry for us. As long as Americans are castigated because of their Mexican heritage, we must stand and engage that discrimination because Mexican Americans are colored people.
Come on.
It's true.
As long as Cuban American migrant workers who are performing tasks vital to the survival of our people, they are systematically being excluded from participating in the voting process, we must stand and engage that exclusion because Cuban Americans are colored people.
You right there.
The fact that unarmed black people are being shot down in the streets requires us to stand and engage the very system that designated them as colored people. Who can disagree with President Obama that the plight and well-being of human beings fleeing war as an issue that demands we stand and engage because Syrian refugees are colored people. The term colored people was assigned to African Americans. We did not choose it. However, it is our custom to stand and engage and claim and seize and redeem it. And this brother went to UMass Amherst, but I went to UMass Boston.
But I went to Boston State before there was a UMass.
I hear that.
All right.
And then we learned through a clear analysis of deoxyribonucleic acid that all humanity emanates from Africa.
Right?
So then, guess what?
Yep.
We all in conclusion, sometimes we receive periodic invitations. You're invited for periodic occasions. However, there comes a time when it becomes mandatory for us to be participatory. That's called a standing engagement. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, we have a standing engagement. The time has come for us to stand and engage. We must stand and engage those forces that would prevent democracy from being available to every kindred and every tribe in our nation. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading a path through the blood of the slaughtered till now we stand. And we stand at last. Let us stand. Let us stand until racism is eradicated. Let us stand until anti-Semitism is annihilated. Let us stand until sexism is outdated, until ageism is ill-fated, and until classism is liquidated, until xenophobia is mitigated, until nepotism is medicated. Let us stand